Welcome everybody who's joining. We're going to give about 1 more minute just for people to trickle in, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started then. Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Negron. I'm the Network Strategy Manager here at ARP. I want to welcome you to this webinar in our ARP webinar series for the Autism Intervention Research Network for Physical Health, which is what the acronym ARP stands for. Really appreciate you all joining us. Because of the number of participants, we're going to mute all your audio throughout the call, but you can submit questions at any time via the Q&A feature or also in the chat box on the webinar console. This entire webinar is being recorded. It'll be available afterwards on ARP website. I'll post that in the chat right here. There'll also be a short evaluation survey at the close of the webinar that I'll post in the chat. Definitely would like you to provide feedback on this webinar, provide suggestions for future webinars as well. So let's get started. I want to first acknowledge the Health Resources and Services Administration as the funding source for ARP. So just as a disclaimer, this project is supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which is under the Autism Intervention Research Network on Physical Health grant. This information, content, and/or conclusions are those of the authors and should not be construed as an official position or policy of, nor should any endorsements be inferred by HRSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. So with that being said, it's my honor to introduce our speaker for today. This is Dr. Brianne Tomaszewski. She is an assistant professor in the teaching program in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of North Carolina. So she's going to conduct a presentation. Please welcome me in presenting her. Take it away, Brianne.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here. As Ben said, I am at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Teach Autism Program, and I'm thrilled today to be sharing one piece of my work related to physical activity. So I'll be talking about physical activity in autistic adults with and without intellectual disability. And I really want to talk about all aspects and thinking about benefits and barriers to participating in physical activity, specifically for autistic adults. I'm going to introduce the framework of capabilities, opportunities, and motivation behavior system that we're using to help develop our program for supporting physical activity. We'll discuss kind of some of the evidence that we have been using to incorporate into our work to support community inclusion. So this first picture is of a inclusive community exercise in our community led by Dr. Carrie Hume and myself, who are co-PIs on the project I'll introduce today. And in this, this community exercise class is offered in Chapel Hill, and it's called Power Hour. And I'll talk about it a little bit later. And then I'll introduce our research project funded by the National Institute of Health, National Institute of Aging, and that we call Physical Activity and Community Empowerment, or PACE. So first I want to just ask everyone here to take a moment and think about, why do you like or do physical activity if you don't really like it? And so think about that in terms of why you do it. What does it add to your life? What does it not add? I'll just give everyone a few seconds just to think. Some of the answers I've heard from our participants and family members range from they do it because they're told to, it's on their schedule, they do it for health reasons, it makes them feel good, and they have goals towards either a race or a sport or losing weight. And sometimes they like certain things and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they hate running, but they like weightlifting, or vice versa. So thinking about that, we're going to talk a little bit about, what we know from the research side of things, what the benefits and barriers are to physical activity. And specifically, like I mentioned, thinking about autistic adults and what we've learned. So on the right, there are some quotes that some of our research participants have shared about some of the things they don't like about exercise. So we know that adults on the autism spectrum, regardless of whether or not they have co-occurring intellectual disability, often don't engage in the recommended levels of physical activity. This is also true for a majority of the general population. However, the research does show that compared to individuals in the general population who do not have a diagnosis, often adults engage in less physical activity than those in that general population as well. And why this is so important is that physical inactivity, so really that also known as sedentary behavior and not moving and not participating, leads to increased risk for disease and health conditions like obesity, hypertension, and diabetes, which are more prevalent and can cause discomfort and symptoms. And so we think about, why do we want to do physical activity? To help us with our health. But first thinking about, okay, so how do we participate? Barriers that have been reported to us as well as in the literature. Transportation is always a huge barrier. So not having a way to get somewhere to exercise. Maybe in those spaces, they're not inclusive and they are not supportive environments. So there's a lack of kind of peer support. Some individuals report just a lack of energy and need for someone to help them, like a trainer, another adult, a family member. Families told us that, you know, it wasn't their preferred activity. So for individuals who weren't interested in doing it, some of their preferred activities or highly focused interests were on the computer. So a parent of a really amazing animator said, you know, he spends a large amount of time on his computer because he enjoys animation, and that is something that he is doing, but it means that he doesn't participate in activity outside of that. And then some autistic adults told us that they don't really like sweating. They don't really like when there's lots of people at the gym, and this is that specific person. Sometimes it can be boring or painful and hard. And so those are all just examples of some of the barriers that we've heard from the research and from our participants, and what we're thinking about when we're designing a program to support individuals and try to think about how to address those barriers. So again, we talked about that why for physical activity. So thinking about how it might make you feel good is one benefit. And so always wanting to look like the quokka in the picture. So thinking about smiling and feeling good maybe after the exercise if it's not too hard and you're not too sweaty. But other benefits that have been shown to have more health-specific benefits in addition to mental health, thinking about physical activity can lead to healthier weight loss for individuals who would like to lose weight, or it has benefits on their health for them. Research has shown that in reduced anxiety, and these last two are really for individuals who want these items. So something that it's helped them be able to interact with others. And so they've been able to have something to share an interest on and gain more friendships that way. And then reducing some of maybe the challenging behaviors like self-injurious behaviors that cause distress. So not thinking about behaviors that are you know, an individual enjoys doing there. And some of the additional quotes from we call them athletes in our study that I'll share about next, but also they said, you know, some think it's relaxing. So maybe some of the exercises they choose to do are relaxing. It gives them something to do to get out of the house. And then liking that it helps get me moving and has endorphins. And my favorite is empowering. So this individual really inspired the name of our next phase of our project, because that's what we want to do. We want to empower adults to feel like their physical activity, they're capable of doing whatever they want to reach their goals, or whatever their goals may be. So some of our initial work looked at just kind of understanding how physical activity was potentially related to aspects of well-being. So we looked at the relationship between just kind of a physical activity measure of step counts. So individuals wore a Fitbit for 1 week. This was at the start of an intervention program. And so we looked at this relationship before they started any intervention program, but they filled out a survey about quality of life for self-report using the Shalek scale, so overall quality of life. And we had individuals who had co-occurring intellectual disability, which was 38. And then some of the individuals did not have intellectual disability, which was qualified as an IQ score below 70. And there was 43. And so we looked at this relationship between how does your kind of average physical activity in the form of average weekly step counts relate to kind of your self-report of overall quality of life scores. And we controlled for IQ as well as age in the sample, because we had a range from 18 to 55. And so we know that we thought there may be differences. So we had those in the model. You'll see that average weekly step counts were significantly associated with quality of life, suggesting that the more step counts people were taking, so theoretically, the more steps people take, whether it's for physical activity or part of their everyday lives at work, they're reporting higher quality of life. Controlling for those IQ scores and age, In the sample where we had individuals with co-occurring intellectual disability, those who had a higher end of the IQ score had higher quality of life scores controlling for that. But when we added the additional 5 people who didn't have intellectual disability, it wasn't significant. But the relationship here is pretty strong. And so that was just showing us that this is one way that we could think about capturing physical activity and how it might be related to well-being. So we were thinking about how we can best measure things and incorporate multiple perspectives in our studies. And this is just one example. For when we move into the intervention component, we want to first introduce you to kind of our framework that we're using to think about how we can support individuals in engaging in more physical activity. So we use the capabilities, opportunities, and motivation framework, often called the COM-B framework, because it leads to behavior change. And so here you see this graph depicts the capability and motivation opportunity in the middle. So that's the COM part. And then it leads to behavior change. And so we also see that it's broken down into different definitions. So each component has a definition of behavior. So you can see there's capabilities. So we think about this like physical skills. So being able to actually physically do some of the activities. For example, if you can physically do some of the yoga balances, I know that I can't, and that's not a capability that I have, as well as kind of the psychological capability, which includes those cognitive skills, like being able to understand and comprehend different things, as well as your comprehension of the exercise, as well as the goals for getting physical activity that will influence the behavior. And you also see that opportunity has both physical and social. And so you can see here that do we have the right environment to do physical activity in? And are there opportunities to really think about the social norms? Is it acceptable to be exercising in this setting based on where I live in my community? So it includes both those kind of material resources as well as the culture of the location when they're located. And then motivation really focuses on really what motivates you. So that why, so whether or not it's, you know, conscious, like you have a goal, or there's some maybe subconscious that are automatic, the endorphins that might make you feel good. And so capability and opportunity are shown as really influencing not only the relationship between motivation and behavior, but also through to each other, and not necessarily directly related to behavior directly, because they need to combine with capability and motivation. And all of them combined really lead to what makes for success. So for example, you may have all the physical skills in the world, but you're not motivated to go and you don't have opportunity, then that may not lead to successful participation in physical activity. So, and you know, an individual in moment to moment can have different changes as well. So we have to think about how to create kind of environments that are allowing the individual to have openness for motivation to generate the behavior. And typically here, in our case, we're thinking about just a participation in physical activity that is related to the individual's goals, their skills, and what type of activity they would want to be participating in. And so, you know, we think about how if you know how to do something and you have a place to do it, you're likely to also be more motivated to do it. And so if I've got, you know, a really great coach and they are giving me a really great exercise plan for running to train for a marathon, and I've been following my training plan and have the skills to run it, I'm more likely to be motivated to go out and run a marathon, versus if I've just been sitting on the couch, have no idea how to train or start, and don't have any motivation. And so these are all really important And when things are difficult, or believe it to be so, like I just said, like if I don't have the training, then it's going to be really hard. So sometimes there's these kind of cycles that'll go back that can be positive or negative depending. And so we're trying to promote some behaviors within this framework to help support learning and practicing and having a skill to improve capability, as well as helping support our environment and motivation. And so through that, this is called the behavior change wheel. And so you see here in the middle of the wheel, we've got these capabilities, the opportunities, and motivation. And so that's our COM-B framework. And then when we develop programming, we're thinking about the functionality of our programs and what we're doing. And so, you know, the hub and the wheel, we've got the psychological and physical capability, physical and social opportunities, and reflective and automatic motivation. The intervention functions are in red, and this is really just broad categories of means by which our programs or interventions are designed to help support change. And so they may be suggested dependent on the different environments and COM-B frameworks components. So thinking about, we've got, and I'll go into specific examples of all of these, but education is an example. We think about incentivization. You see a picture of a trophy, training, modeling, all different examples of intervention functions. And then finally, on the outside, really thinking about some policy categories that really would help support the delivery of all of these intervention functions. So that can include, you know, guidelines, so the healthy physical activity guidelines for 2030, environment changes and planning, thinking about marketing, communication, allocation of funding and regulations, and then different types of thinking about influence. So it depends on, you know, what types of intervention functions you target, and in that case. So here's one depiction of kind of how we think about how each of the intervention functions is related to the capability, opportunity, and motivation. And so you'll see here that education and training really focus on that psychological capability of understanding and learning about the skills of exercise. And we see enablement, or, you know, supporting someone being able to do the work is really across all of them, and some of them, so we can see here, and I'll go into some specific examples, but just to show you that they're all tied to this framework. And so now let's get into what strategies that we have incorporated into our program, as well as that are from the literature for supporting these in physical activity participation in autistic adults. So the first phase of our work was from a project called Step It Up. And Step It Up was led by Dr. Melissa Savage and Dr. Kara Hume, who are now my co-PIs. And I had the pleasure of joining the program when I started my postdoc here at the University of North Carolina with the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute. This program was funded by the Organization for Autism Research Applied Research Grant, and was a randomized controlled trial with a waitlist design for adults with autistic adults with co-occurring intellectual disability. And they participated in the Step It Up program, which I'll go into detail in a few slides. Participation in the program led to increased step counts. So you see over here on the left, there is a graph that shows you the step counts. And so we see that the blue line, which is the Step It Up group, the group that received the 12-week intervention, that I'll tell you what exactly it held, showed increased average weekly step counts compared to the control group that didn't show a statistically significant change in their step counts over time. So individuals in the Step It Up group got an intervention program, whereas individuals in the waitlist control group just were wearing a Fitbit. And so they were wearing a Fitbit, both groups, that's how we were capturing their steps, but they didn't have any supports in the waitlist control group until it was their turn. Similarly, we found that individuals in the Step It Up group lost weight, a small amount, but still they lost weight versus the control group actually gained weight, which was statistically significant. So those were our kind of findings. So what is Step It Up? So here we have the different components that I'll walk us through, but just to kind of give you an overview of all of the different behavior change strategies that we'll talk about. But the biggest thing is that we did Step It Up with our the community. So individuals with who are autistic with a co-occurring intellectual disability identified a coach. It could have been a caregiver, but it just had to be someone that they could meet with once a week. And the coach is the person who kind of delivered the program with the athlete, like we called them, the Step It Up athletes. And so the coaches started by doing a web-based training and watching different video demonstrations and how to walk the athlete through our different processes. And then the coach trained the athlete in providing an overview about Step It Up, learning about the Fitbit, introduction to what they were having goal setting meetings weekly, identifying practice opportunities as well as reinforcers to help them with that, giving that incentivization for participating. And in the weekly meetings that they had with the coach, they looked at their weekly step counts because this was all about increasing their average step counts using the Fitbit. They set their goals for the week ahead and a schedule to exercise to reach those step counts. So whether that was walking or running, they learned how to put the information in the Fitbit app. So the Fitbit app has an opportunity to kind of monitor. And then also then they would have to email some of the data to us as well as take some videos so we could follow. And during the exercise sessions, their goals were just to follow what their schedule was, engage in exercise, and then adjust their schedule as needed to meet the goals. If they saw that they weren't maybe going to meet their weekly step count goal, that they would try to adjust their schedule and add additional sessions to meet their goal. So I'll start by introducing you to the training. So the web-based coaching component really focused on the education and training for the coaches to then provide the education and the training to the athletes. So throughout the study, we really focused on self-management as our evidence-based practice to really help support individuals learning how to use self-regulation strategies to help reach their goals towards physical activity. So these are really thinking about kind of the shaping of the knowledge and demonstrating the different behaviors. So demonstrating different aspects of how to set a goal, a step count goal specifically for this project, how to evaluate whether or not you met your step count goal, and self-monitoring throughout the week to see if you need to adjust your schedule, and then self-reinforcement to help incentivize you to meet your goals. So we'll go into that, but just this alone really focuses on the behavior change techniques and intervention functions that are part of that behavior change wheel. So goal setting is, pretty, here's pictures of some of our athletes working during their goal setting meeting. The process of identifying something you want to accomplish and establish measure goals and timeframes. Again, in our particular study, we were really focused on step counts, and we had a variety of individuals at different stages in where they needed supports and what their goal setting were. So some individuals were calculating their goals, their step counts on their own, and others were using the app and learning how to do things with support of their coach. So up close, here's what the goal setting template looked like. And they used the Fitbit app. So here they really talked about, okay, what was last week's goal? And we followed the reason for the different 70,000 steps was based on recommendations at the time to how to make sure that we weren't increasing everyone's steps too much. And so kind of if they were under 70,000, they had a calculation that they would make, and if they were over, they would add 2,000. And so that was just based on best recommendations at the time of the study when thinking about safely increasing someone's step counts for physical activity. So they followed this checklist every week, or this flow chart every week, to really think through whether or not they met their goal, and then what they were going to need to do to plan for next. Do they set a new goal, or do they keep the same goal and try again and brainstorm about why they might not have met their goal? I can say that from the beginning of the study, we had here in North Carolina a hurricane. And so a hurricane was one of the notes of why someone didn't meet their goal one week. And then their very last participant wrote COVID-19 as their reason for not meeting their goal. So we spanned all the reasons, but there could be something like, I was sick, or I had surgery, or I was traveling, or I didn't have transportation. And so we gave a chance for athletes and coaches to really think through, why did you miss your goal, to think if we can try to do things differently. So the are thinking about kind of self-evaluation. So that part of, did I meet my goal? So having to look at the Fitbit app and really thinking about, assessing your performance. So some individuals, again, looking at their goals, learning whether or not they assess, celebrating that they met their goal. Here we've got training and thinking about, what is helping them stay motivated, and using the Fitbit app as well as modeling. And so the coaches had opportunities throughout the entire 12 weeks to continue, and they reported back to us kind of what steps they did differently each week. And we could see that all of our athletes were developing different ways that they preferred to self-evaluate and decide how they wanted to go about the process themselves. So really taking that individualization for how they wanted to get feedback from their coach and monitor, as well as the social support. So some coaches were really motivating and helping do, the math on the calculator, or stood back and let the athlete lead the coaching session towards the end. And so we had a range of experiences. So here we have the example that we've given, and that the athletes had access to kind of look at how do they meet their goal. And this is a screenshot from the app, and they had a couple of different places that they could do. So if people wanted a written goal, there was a sheet in their binder that they could fill out. And they could also just look at the app to see if they met their goal, because they could enter in their goal into the app, which I'll show you on the next slide. So here in this scenario, the individual is shown, okay, did this person meet their goal? And their goal during week 3 was 50,000 steps in 1 week. And this week they had 48,000. So they did not meet their goal. And there are lots of different ways that they could have had supports in identifying whether or not they met their goal. Then if they did meet their goal, they would use this. We had lots of task analyses with visual supports to really help individuals walk through the steps. And, they might use these in the beginning and use them less over time, but really walking through how you might calculate a new goal. Some individuals preferred a calculator versus some individuals use talk to text on their phone. And they taught me new ways on how to calculate their new goal too. So then they would be able to go into their Fitbit app and set the current step goals and delete the goals. And so we have them walk through that with their coaches every week. And then during the week, they would look, self-monitor, like I mentioned, kind of thinking about, how am I doing? Did I meet my goals? So we see here someone used a calendar to kind of monitor whether or not they were exercising, and they put on their goal setting meetings, as well as some smiley faces to kind of indicate whether or not they met their step counts. So really thinking about keeping track and writing it down. And some of the smiley faces here serve as kind of that reinforcement of a little happy face when you meet your goal. And then they also chose to really put some of their walks on that they planned with their coaches. Thinking about other kinds of self-monitoring examples that we can all use in physical activity. A lot of people like closing the rings on the Apple Watch. We've heard that as a way to kind of motivate. And there are different things you can think about for helping support self-monitoring. So in all of our examples, tasks could be broken down to really one step at a time. So not showing the overall list, but covering things up. So you're really breaking it down to make it one step at a time. You can use as many visual supports as needed. Trying pictures only can sometimes be helpful for us, for visual learners, to be able to see it. Here are some just examples of different ways that you can show a timer. You can often show pictures for trying to understand how individuals are working hard and get a sense of their exertion. And then thinking about just having different ways that work for the individual to really focus on keeping track of things. And finally, we have self-reinforcement. So thinking about what do you get when you are completing your goal. And so this can be a range of things. And so we had the individuals select things that they wanted to earn. We talked a lot about how we wanted them to be things that were, already available. So like if you completed your goal, you could play video games, listen to music. They didn't have to cost money. They were hoping to, we encourage picking more than one because we know that, over 12 weeks, it might be a lot. So having some reinforcers that work for them. So not a reinforcer that the coach is implementing, but something that is going to help motivation. So we've heard from our current study, individuals, direct support professionals have said, they'll put like a bottle of their favorite drink on the table, and then they know that once they get off the 30 minutes on the treadmill, they're going to be able to go and enjoy that drink. And then also just putting it on their schedule that right after exercise, they're going to do something that they enjoy and that they select. And so that is kind of the example of self-reinforcement. So that incentivization or reward type of language there. And it's really, again, meant to be for the individual. So that's why that word self is really important. So kind of talking about what, summarizing it all together in our study and Step It Up, they were self-evaluating. They would, if they met their goal, they would calculate a new goal. We started off in everyone doing a baseline week so that that was their goal for week one so that they could have a sense of hopefully accomplishment. Although we did have some participants in a basketball camp that week one, so it was better to get a different baseline to help them. We want to set them up for success in that beginning. So then they kind of write their new goal if they want to write it down or just enter it into the Fitbit app. They then have an action plan where they schedule to the exercise days and times and set alarms for those exercise days and times. Some different self-monitoring in our study, the Fitbit daily, evaluating progress, checking the app, and adjusting the plan as needed. And then looking at, if the goal is met, what your identified reinforcer is. And then if the goal is not met, try again next week. And for some individuals where their goal wasn't met for several weeks in a row, we would support them in changing their goal to maybe be lower so that they could be set up again for success and not get discouraged. So a couple of different things that were successes and challenges. So it was really nice that everyone had that individualization and support, and they had their coaches and the consistency and routines and choices and different ways to monitor. So you see that all the fun faces and looking at the different ways to monitor on a calendar versus using the app and writing things down. And thinking about what individuals wanted to do though is, they wanted maybe other goals. So not necessarily step counts being the only way to monitor physical activity, and supporting kind of flexibility as well. So lots of weather, family circumstances, some injuries and vacations. So thinking about how to problem solve through that. Other feedback that we heard was they really liked it, but they didn't get a chance to like meet anybody new. They weren't really in their community as much. They were in their home communities, and maybe they were getting more time with their coach, but oftentimes their coach was already someone they spent a lot of time with. So they were wanting to get out and meet more people and have more access to different kinds of exercises and maybe different kinds of environments. And so if you remember from my first slide, Power Hour was developed here in Chapel Hill by Dr. Kara Hume and her at the CrossFit gym. And they have a couple of classes a month that focus on individuals with and without disabilities who are included in the same class and do exercise together. And so we thought that potentially combining these two would be a really good approach to help incorporate some of the limitations. So we think here, there's lots of different benefits of group exercise classes. So you get that social support, potentially modeling from peers, as well as environments like the gyms being able to be restructured and supportive and inclusive of all abilities, physical as well. And then thinking about leading to kind of those just a reinforcement by being there. We hear a lot that some of our individuals participate in things like Special Olympics because their friends are there. And so that's similar to this. And so how you can do, Power Hour in your communities. We know that you can partner with a local gym. More would probably be ideal than 1 or twice a month, but whatever works for your community. Mixing individuals with and without disabilities, working out together for exercise, but also that social connection. So we always start with kind of a social question to think about incorporating more community belonging and integration among our population, and then having games and then workouts that are modified and adapted, often partnering with physical therapists to help us adapt as needed. So lots of different fun themes centered around games to help warm up. And then again, modifications for athletes as needed, and individuals. Wheelchair users are included as well with modifications as to support them. And then visual supports and scaffolding as needed. And so meeting the athletes where they're at and helping provide demonstration and modeling and visual supports. And, the first thing you can do is reach out to different gyms, lots of different recommendations here in terms of if you're interested in your community, thinking about an inclusive exercise program. We've partnered in our community with YMCAs, Parks and Rec, universities, the Autism Society of North Carolina, or the Autism Society in your region, and the ARC, and just the sports leagues and adaptive sports programs as well. And so all potential places that can be supportive of disseminating information, which leads me to talking about our last section of what PACE became. So the goal of our physical activity and commuter empowerment program is really to support physical and mental health of adults with not only autism, but also intellectual and developmental disabilities through inclusive exercise opportunities. So what we mean by inclusive is these group exercise classes that are held at local gyms that are open to individuals with and without disabilities. So the two components that I just have described kind of from the COM-B framework intervention approach is the one-on-one coaching, which is really that step it up, and then the inclusive group fitness class, which is Power Hour. And so combining the two into one 16-week intervention program. Right now, we are in the pilot phase of finalizing our measures, as well as conducting interviews and focus groups with exercise professionals, parents and caregivers, direct support providers, and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities to further expand upon what barriers and facilitators, in addition to what we already know that's in the literature, but what we can do to improve our program. So focus groups started with a survey so that we could kind of get a sense of any barriers and facilitators. And so from our exercise professionals, so these are people who are working at gyms, our physical therapy, our physical therapists, trainers. We saw here that many exercise professionals felt that they did not have the adequate training or space, or they hadn't been approached. And so some of the ways that we're hoping to address that is we're providing payment for our research study for exercise trainers to get additional certification in adaptive exercise to help support their learning and training and education of modifications. We hope that that will address that. And what's shown here is this would be, you know, that a facilitator would kind of be that they have the motivation, they want to work, which the ones we've worked with so far are really motivated. Having enough team members and collaborators, making sure that they've got the training or coaching and then connection with the community and then specific kind of materials and things like that. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to explore what else we learn from the focus groups as we're currently coding the data to see so that we can incorporate it into our program, which we're hoping to launch this fall. From caregivers, we saw that a lot of the barriers were related to interest in exercise. And so individuals just not having that interest, as well as not knowing about opportunities in the community. Whereas facilitators were really the biggest facilitator that we heard was any additional personnel who could support their child in engaging. And so these are their adult children. And these caregivers and parents said that as they start to age, they need support and can't keep up with and then also that they didn't really want to exercise with their mom or dad or caregiver. And so that was really the biggest facilitator that came through. As far as direct support professionals, we know that they would need more training as well as more team members. And so when someone is a direct support professional and they're with a group of 6, they may need more team members to help support everyone participating in the modified individual programs. And then also some of the individuals they work with don't have the interest and there aren't facilities that are accommodating for the needs of the individuals that they work with. Facilitators have really been focused on really the accessible facilities or equipment from these direct support professionals. So they often, if they're working in group homes, they are having to go out into the community gym and they aren't necessarily large enough or have the right space to accommodate everybody. And their current home may not have the right environment for physical activity. And they also may not have it on their goal plan and they're not interested. And so it's hard to support. And so we're working with our community to really support thinking about bringing this to communities and building the capacity of direct support professionals to feel like they have the tools they need to help support physical activity in these kinds of settings. So we are currently coding in the interviews as well for the adults with intellectual disability. And here are some of the definitions that we've found so far. So we're kind of categorizing different health benefits and outcomes that individuals mention, like satisfaction or stress. The social opportunities coming through of thinking about the sense of belonging. We've heard that a lot. As well as those progress monitoring, so how we can think about it and how do we want to support that. One thing that's coming through is individualization, so having choice and recommendations and varieties and modification, and then preparedness, so really just the level of the individual is at and meeting them where they are. And this also includes preparedness for exercise professionals, caregivers and direct support professionals, So make sure that they have the skills and resources and plans in place to exercise. So stay tuned as we hope to hopefully have another presentation in the future for sharing the results of and incorporating the perspective of our adults with IDD as well as we get into our coding. So next up for us is we are finalizing a web-based dashboard. So we're not going to be using Fitbits. We're going to be using actigraphs so that we can focus on having the different exercise goals in addition to step counts. So you see on the screen, the dashboard has step counts, but also active minutes, and they'll be able to select what types of exercises and we've been piloting that with some of our participants. And we'll move into a clinical trial where individuals will have a waitlist control, will be randomized to the PACE program, or they'll wait 16 weeks and then start the PACE program. We're going to be located in North Carolina and Arkansas initially, and then hope to disseminate. But in the meantime, our resources will be available on our website, which will launch hopefully early fall. And so with that, I want to thank you and open it up to questions, and then just give a shout out to my team, the co-PIs, as well as our wonderful research assistants, Doa Shin and Allie and Hayden and Laura and graduate student Emily. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Brianne. Thank you for all the work you're doing in this area. Yeah, as she mentioned, we have time for questions now. You can ask those questions either by using the Q&A function, or you can just type them in the chat. So I'll let y'all do that, and then Brianne can look at them and answer.
Yeah, so I see the first one, sorry, is in the chat. Hard to find activities that you can be consistent about and that you don't hate. And I think that is a really hard thing, that if you want to stay consistent, that you want to be able to have that thing you like. And so I think that some of the things is, if it's really hard to get motivated, thinking about trying a new thing that might incorporate something that motivates you. So whether or not that it was individuals who, for example, like really like dogs, could go to, for example, like a dog shelter and potentially take a dog on a walk. And so kind of thinking about outside of the box that may not be typical of what you think about when you're exercising, or trying all sorts of different things like dance and different kinds of exercise. But it isn't easy. And so the thing I would recommend is not giving up to help continuing to find. And then once you found that, incorporating it into your schedule so that you can support the building of developing that habit or routine of exercise. And I see a question as well from Alice. Again, yes, individuals who aren't motivated, that we've worked with at some of our group homes where they have really no interest at all, is putting it on their schedule. And so those individuals who follow a routine, having it on their schedule has been something that has helped them just to get started. And yes, we do have that in our study. We have medications and we get that information. And we actually were surprised about the weight finding. We're not actually looking at BMI or weight as an outcome in our clinical trial. We'll be using body composition instead to see if that works as a better measure of strength gain over time. And we're also doing some different physical activity measures to really help capture gain in skills, because we know that you're exactly right. Like there's medications that cause weight gain, and that's not also an indicator of health necessarily because of that. And so, and we definitely try a lot of different motivation. For some individuals who do like the social piece, that can be really helpful to come and do the group. And those who don't, we have to think about ways that we can support incorporating some of their interests, in lots, not just like putting pictures of their interest places, but really doing something that they do prefer and identifying that as a preferred reinforcer potentially too. And so then I see Jeff, setting goals itself was overwhelming. You know, I think that we didn't have a ton of overwhelm with the step counts, because we were just focused on that one goal, and we broke it down into steps. For individuals who might have been overwhelmed, we didn't use the list. We might have used different visuals. We had one participant that just really struggled with the math, and so we kind of took that piece out because it wasn't necessary. So using supports to get the math. And then we'll learn in our clinical trial, now that we're going to have 2 goals, supports that we can do. We can, on our web-based dashboard, we can toggle options on and off to make it, you know, choices, to have 1 choice or 2 choice. And then actually in our web-based dashboard, we're taking out math completely, and it'll calculate it automatically. If they want to calculate it, we can also toggle that off. And so we're really going to think about continuing to individualize for the athletes. And this is a feasibility clinical trial, so we're hoping to get this kind of feedback as we develop and expand our program. So any other questions? Let's see, Monica in the chat said working with the behavior, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to expand upon that. I'd be happy to talk more. I'm just not sure which behavior you're referring to. And thank you to Alice.
Great. Okay. Well, it looks like all the questions have been asked. Again, I want to thank you for attending this webinar. It's been recorded, like I mentioned before. It will be archived on the ARP website, also on the YouTube channel. Also, it would be really great for you all to take a couple minutes to complete the survey that I'm going to post on chat in a second. Really just want your feedback for future webinars, selecting speakers, selecting topics that you want to hear about, to make it a better experience for all. Oh, it looks like Monica posted in the chat as well, so I'll give her a chance, Brianna, a chance to address it.
Okay, so I think you might be referring to if we work with individuals who have maybe some challenging behaviors like aggression or self-injury. If that's wrong, let me know in the chat. But we do incorporate, you know, we allow everyone to participate, and we work with individuals who know them best to identify how we can support them in participating. And you know, we do have to adjust the schedule if the day is not going to work for exercise, and try to do it in lots of different ways, and work with their team of caregivers and direct support to help identify ways that we can support their participation safely and in ways that they enjoy. But we also educate the community too on like normalizing. We have one person who might make a lot of loud noises during exercise, and we just are supporting our environments and becoming more inclusive of just accepting how individuals are acting as well in the gyms.
Awesome. I'm glad you're able to address that. Again, in the chat, just posted the link where the webinar will be recorded. In case you didn't see the whole thing, you need to want to reference it in the future. And then below that is the webinar evaluation survey. Takes maybe 2 minutes, and it would really help for future webinars. So again, thank you, Brianne.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And thank you all for attending. And hopefully we'll see you at the one in July. More information will be posted on the ARP website. So thank you all. I think you were a hit, Brianne.
Good.
The vibe I got.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation from Gabriel and being able to share some of this work as we're just getting started, really.
Yeah, so we I don't know if you're interested, but we for the rest of 2024 we have webinars booked. But if you make any progress on research and you want to,
Oh yeah,
you know,
absolutely. In 2025 or 2026, that would be great.
Yeah, just feel free to reach out to me.
Okay.
Really, whenever's convenient for you, you can do another one of these.
Awesome. Yeah, hopefully once we get some kind of preliminary results, and then we do have some really nice perspectives from adults with IDD that we haven't, we're in the process of just getting started. So that would be nice to share. So,
Gotcha.
All right. Well, thank you.
I'll send you the recording. Yeah, no problem. I'll send you the recording once we have it. But thank you again.
Okay. Yeah.
Great to
Thank
meet you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.